Hi, and welcome to another episode of Smecco Connects. I'm Sonja Cox.
And I'm Tom Dennison. I'm Senior Vice President here at Smecco Government Affairs and your co-host on this podcast. So it's nice seeing you again, and it's nice being here.
Nice seeing you as well. Are you tired?
I am. It's been a busy last 3 months or so.
Yeah. What we're going to talk about today is those last 3 months and what you've been up to. And so, Tom, you spend a lot of your time those first 3 months of the year, 4 months of the year, working on things over in Annapolis. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure do. And it's funny. I was thinking the other day. It's been this is my 26th legislative session. So 20 of them have been with Smecco, and then 6 prior sessions have been whenever I was a newspaper reporter.
Oh, so you must have started when you were 5 or something.
Exactly.
Right?
I wish. But I tell you, it's just part of my life now. I mean, from Christmas comes, and then the year ends, and then it's almost like their session. It's just kind of a part of what I've been doing, and it's secondhand to me at this point. But the Maryland General Assembly, it meets every year for 90 days. Starts in second week of January and goes to the second week of April. And during those 90 days, we, Smecco, are involved in numerous pieces of legislation that affect utilities. And I think on any given session, we could be reviewing, testifying, trying to lobby more than 100 bills. This year was particularly eventful because, one, it's an election year, so the June primaries are coming up, and then the November general election's coming up. And one of the hottest topics during this year's session was the cost of electricity and how legislators wanted to craft policy that would help lower electricity prices, lower electric bills for their constituents, our customers. So it was a session unlike any that I had really experienced in my 20-some years, because just there's always politics, obviously, but there was a lot of accusations. There was a lot of rhetoric that was going on this year that was a little more than normal. But fortunately, what I will say is that Smecco kind of stays a little bit above that fray. We have a very solid reputation in Annapolis, and I am very proud of that. And it's because of your leadership, your predecessor's leadership, my predecessor's reputation in Annapolis, that a lot of legislators come to us for straight answers. We don't have any profit motive, really. I mean, we're a not-for-profit co-op, and our owners are our customers. Customers are our owners. So our mission is very pure.
Right.
And so anyway, I just kind of level set that for what we do during those 90 days. We, of course, have our Southern Maryland delegation, and we work closely with them, but we spend most of our times in the 2 policy committees that handle utility legislation. That in the House, that's the House Environment and Transportation Committee, and in the Senate, it's the Senate Education, Environment, and Energy Committee.
Okay. Well, you talk about the 90-day session, but I imagine there's some things happening before session even starts, right?
Oh, sure. And I think that's part of our job, right? Just to kind of understand what the hot topics are going to be, what legislators are going to talk about, and sort of how to prepare to work against or work alongside legislators on what they want to do. When it comes to most of the bills that we deal with, bills that we oppose typically will cost our ratepayers money.
Right.
And we have always been consistent in the policy may be fine. The policy may be great politically, but it's also our responsibility to at least inform our legislators that this policy comes with a price.
Right.
And whether that's renewable portfolio standard, which governs how much renewable energy we have to provide to our customers, to Empower Maryland programs, to various other mandates, those affect us and they come with a cost. And we try to provide those kinds of costs to people.
Well, and sometimes I think they come to you and ask you, you know, if we did this, how much would this cost your membership?
Yeah, they 100% do because the best ideas in the world are typically not the cheapest ideas,
Right.
and I think it's our job to some things we just can't predict because they're based on the market of the energy market that we can't necessarily predict. But when there's certain standards that are put in place, like how much renewable energy we have to provide our membership to, reliability standards, like how that will dictate the investments that we make in our system and the reliability improvements that we have to make to meet the criteria that is in the law. Those do come with a cost.
Right.
And I think it's a helpful dialogue that we like to have with legislators. And sometimes it works out great and sometimes they move forward and it is what it is. We move on to the next bill.
Right. Right. So how much time do you think you spend there? I know you have some late nights and
Yes.
What is the typical day like for you when you go over there?
So the typical session, the first few weeks are a lot of glad handing, a lot of just remembering, getting trying to set the stage for what's going to come up. Then you get to kind of the middle of the session and the work picks up. And what I typically do is I spend some time here at the office in Hughesville in the morning, and then I drive to Annapolis, and then the hearings for bills always start at like 1:00 in the afternoon. So, and some days they may have hearings on 15 bills, and one of the bills on that calendar is the one I care about. So you just kind of go up and you sit through there and wait until you get called to go up and testify. And what that testimony consists of is you get, in most committees, you get 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes to go up to the table, say your name, introduce yourself, and provide what your position is on the bill and why. And so in order to be effective, I think you have to be able to know those legislators outside of the committee.
Right.
And so a lot of the work that you can imagine goes on before the lights are on in the committee and before the hearing starts or after the hearing ends. We're working with those legislators and their staffs after the hearing to, advocate on our behalf. And so it's very difficult to give a traditional day. Like this year, something that I had never seen before, there were subcommittee hearings that were held at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And
Oh, wow.
and they were all done remotely via Zoom. And we had an opportunity to kind of listen in. And then if we were called on, we could provide input. But a lot of it was different. I mean, it wasn't that traditional kind of committee setting where everybody had amendments in front of them and they were putting together the bill, and it was different. And not saying it was good or bad, it was just different. And we did a lot of that, and especially in the House, it was a lot of late evenings that we were doing these remote meetings, and it worked out ultimately fine for SMECO, but it was just a different way of doing things.
Do you want to talk about some of the specifics of things that affect us that
Yeah.
were passed or not passed? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The the Speaker of the House and the Senate President at the beginning of session kind of put I'll just say utility issues at the top of the list in terms of we need to do something to help save people money on their electric bills. And we didn't know exactly how they were going to do it. So there were more than a dozen bills that were introduced that affected any number of programs. And so what happened in some of these late night meetings that we had was the staff from the Public Service Commission, the staff from the Speaker's office, and the committee staff, they started building what they kind of referred to as an omnibus energy package. That bill started out in the House, and where the primary savings are going to occur is there's a program that we have called Empower Maryland, and that's a state mandated program that everybody can see on their electric bill. There's an Empower Maryland charge, and like for instance, on my bill, if I use about 1,500 kilowatt hours a month, it's right around $20, and so a lot of the policies that were put together were targeting Empower Maryland. And so how did they achieve savings? They achieved those savings by ratcheting back some of the mandates that were in the Empower Maryland program. So Empower Maryland is designed to help people save and to conserve electricity.
Right.
Or just recently, they converted it to greenhouse gas reduction. So what they did was the mandate was that we would have to achieve, SMECO would have to achieve a 2.25% GHG greenhouse gas reduction in 2027. They bumped that down to 1.75.
Okay.
So they also took $100 million from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, SEIF. SEIF is a fund that is funded by when utilities like SMECO, when we don't have enough renewable energy to buy on the system, we pay an alternative compliance payment, and those alternative compliance payments are penalties that are supposed to go to help incentivize new renewable generation to be built.
Right.
Well, over the last couple of years, this SEIF fund has really exploded. And so Maryland had a pretty difficult budget year. So they took several $100 million from SEIF and used it to help the budget deficit. And then they took $100 million and they are going to give it back to utilities to help lower the Empower Maryland charge. Again, it's somewhat complicated. There will be an impact on your bill. It's not going to be something that you're going to wake up in a month or two and say, "Oh my gosh, my bill is like a half of what it is." But there is that charge that the state is in charge of that they tried to lower. And I think it's not just for this year. So there's going to be savings that are going to go forward because those percentages are going to stay lower than what they otherwise would have been.
So you'll see an incremental reduction, maybe.
Yes. SMECO, as you know, we have to develop an Empower Maryland suite of programs,
Right.
and that suite of programs is for a 3-year cycle, and that has to be approved by the Public Service Commission. So we have to go back in, I think it's next year, for our new set of programs. And those new set of programs will be targeting at a lower number. So thereby shouldn't cost us as much to reach the goals that we have to based on the law.
Okay. But the program's not going away altogether.
The program's not going away. And I think there's a lot of validity to the program because the old saying is an electron that is saved is one that we don't have to buy. And so that's, to the extent we can conserve electricity, that does help the system at large. And but it does come at a cost. And so I think for a lot of the Democrats in Annapolis, it was a tough pill to swallow because a lot of the environmental community was not not happy with it.
Right.
So I think I think it was a big step, but it's like I said, it's not going to be a life-changing savings, but it will provide some savings.
Okay.
A couple of other, just real quick, there were some other savings that are going to be achieved through um, just efficiencies and smaller mandates, but the Empower Maryland one was the big one. And a lot of the other bills that were combined into this one large bill were focused just on investor-owned utilities. So they exempted SMECO because, again, we don't have shareholders to pass these costs on to. That all goes into our rates that our membership pays for. So we were very fortunate on that, and it's a lot of it because of the advocacy that we do
Right.
with legislators.
A lot of the things that I've seen, I mean, you have to take what's on social media with a grain of salt, but
Sure.
a lot of people seem to think that the distribution portion of their bill is larger than the power supply portion. But I think a lot of that reason is because that's where you see that Empower Maryland charge, the EUSP charge, like if there's a county that has county taxes, that's all
Yes.
going to be included. And those are really just pass-through costs for us because we're required to do these programs, we pass the costs on to our members to pay. But where you really see the big part of your bill is the power supply portion. And I know that was talked about a lot in Annapolis this year.
It really was, and I actually always have a copy of my bill nearby when I'm talking to legislators. And when they bring up things like that, I always like to point out that it's not the distribution part that is really driving the bill. It's the commodity portion, and I'm just looking at mine, and it's well over 60% of my commodity. I'm looking at almost yeah, it's way over 60-70% of my bill
Right.
is more is on the commodity side. And the reason that the commodity is really in focus right now is because the costs for the commodity have gone up so much. And we're looking and you would know better than I, but the costs that are on the market right now because of the lack of generation that we have in our PJM system have just exploded over the last year, 2 years, and they're going to continue to go up until there's more generation that's built, and not only in Maryland but in the PJM
Right.
grid. So there was some discussion this year on bills that would help spur on some new generation. The legislature kind of empowered the Power Plant Research Group, which is an arm of Department of Natural Resources, to go out and find potential sites. And there was money that was set aside for that. There's incentives for battery storage. There's incentives for data centers to have their own generation
Right.
that they wanted to require. And I think those are all positive, good steps, because the bottom line is that Maryland is a generation deficit state.
Right.
We import more than 40% of our electricity, and it's a major issue that we're going to continue to be faced with, and it's going to continue to drive prices up.
Right. So some of the sites that they've gone around looking for where they can build generation, have they backed off a little bit on it having to be renewable or emissions free, or are we talking natural gas plants again or not?
Yeah, I think the focus has been on these small modular nuclear reactors, but it's a very novel technology, but it's just not here, and it's not ready for prime time.
And it's like nobody wants to be first.
Nobody wants to be first. The costs are pretty prohibitive, and the timeline is pretty prohibitive as well. So Maryland has a general sense of trying to get away from fossil fuels. There is ample evidence of that. However, there was a bill last year that kept natural gas as part of the portfolio, and I think you're going to continue to see investments in some sites around the state that do have natural gas connections that generation could be built. I think it's difficult in Maryland. Just the reality of it is, and but I'm just saying that it's just absolutely necessary, and I think a lot of legislators have come to that same conclusion.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, I think when it comes to generation, I think obviously your renewables are always kind of top priority for many legislators in Annapolis, but I do think that base load fossil fuel generation is certainly not going away, and it's desperately needed.
It's still needed for sure.
Absolutely.
Need to be able to have dispatchable generation.
100%. Yeah, because God knows we had a cold winter,
We did.
and every plant was at capacity, pushing out electricity that we needed, and it was predominantly fossil fuels.
Um, I had, I think the mandate from the state is they want, what is it, 1,600 megawatts of battery storage to be built?
Yes, that is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
That's
Yeah.
the number. So I think there's a deadline looming for information to be provided to the PSC on some of that stuff as well.
And there's proposals. I know there's been companies who have responded to the Public Service Commission's RFP request for proposal on some of those battery storage projects. And I think, I know we've been in discussions with some developers on trying to locate battery storage right here in Southern Maryland, which
Right.
is very exciting. And it's funny, you and I, we get a lot of phone calls from solar developers. We get calls from data center people. We get battery storage calls, and we treat them all the same. I mean, we try to put together a process to how they can safely, reliably connect to our system, and and hopefully benefit our region. And I think whether it's battery storage or a new solar project, it's got to be fiscally responsible for us to maybe be a part of it. But if it's not, doesn't mean it's going to go away. It just means that we have to take a different track.
And, I know we're talking about session, but we talk a lot about how we manage our power supply. And we have a new partner who we've signed a long-term deal with for 400 megawatts of power at a really good price from a plant that's located in our service territory. So I was really proud of that because we're trying to do business where we are located because that should help decrease some of our costs. So we're always looking for ways to decrease costs on the commodity side as well as the distribution side.
It is, and it's something that I talk about a lot in Annapolis, is that we have a pretty unique way of purchasing power, and it gives us flexibility to take advantage of good deals that may be short term, maybe longer term, and I think it's been recognized by legislators that we have a great partner in ACES Power Marketing, and we have this portfolio that allows us to insulate our membership from some of the wild swings in the market. And certainly it doesn't insulate us from the higher cost across the system, but it also allows us to take advantage of good deals when we can get them. And it's because of deals like that 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 SMECO has had the really strong track record that we have with our lower SOS, our standard offer service price, as compared to our investor owned utilities that are much larger and nearby.
Well, one more thing, maybe to close, that I
Sure.
wanted to ask you about was we had some success with Senate Bill 1, I believe it was 2 sessions ago.
Yeah, 2024.
So, because we had retail suppliers that were charging a lot more for the commodity than we as the standard offer service provider was charging, and we started reporting that up to the commission. And I think there was a lot of a lot of members, when that happened, when we were able to, they couldn't price gouge, you
Right.
know, if they wanted to provide service in our service territory. So they were limited to what they could charge. So a lot of them went away for the residential customer. So again, if you're looking at social media, you see a lot of people say, "Well, you've taken competition away, and as prices are going to go up." But in our case, that wasn't what was happening. Prices were higher than what we were charging.
Not only higher, but much higher. And uh, Smecco, we have about 180 some thousand accounts, right? And at our peak, we had between 5 and 10,000 customers who were shopping. We're getting the commodity portion of their bill from another entity
Mhm.
other than Smecco. And we looked at the numbers, and customers who were on alternative supply were paying significantly higher to the tune of well over $3 to $4 million a year.
Right.
And so we took that evidence and we put it together. We provided it to some local legislators. Delegate Brian Crosby from St. Mary's County took on this issue in Annapolis. And in 2024, we passed a sweeping reform of the retail energy supply market, and largely because of the evidence that we provided. And that was a tremendous accomplishment for Smecco. And yes, a lot of those suppliers went away. This year during session, they started taking a couple of baby steps to try to incentivize some retail suppliers to come back. They're now going to allow them to provide 3-year contracts of if they're 110% of the standard offer service. So basically, if we're at 10 cents, they could be at 11, and they could provide the electricity for that for a 3-year period. But I'm not sure how that's going to impact the market. I don't know how many companies are going to be incentivized to come back. I guess time will tell, but I think it's the advocacy that we had done on behalf of our customers that has really led to a lot of good reforms and something that we could be proud of. So we get criticized as being monopolies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it comes with the territory, but I think with Smecco, our what we pay is what we charge.
Right.
It's a straight pass through. And our track record has been such that we can be proud of what we charge because it's lower than our investor-owned utilities up the road.
Right. Well, I sure hope you get some rest.
Well, I appreciate your support. I appreciate our board of directors' support. I look forward to giving them the update at the end of, well, I guess it'll be that later this month. We'll give the update from session and look forward to interacting with our customers going forward.
Yes. Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.